Have you ever wondered what really happens when you stop chasing someone who always kept you at a distance? When the texts stop? When the calls end? When your silence becomes permanent? Most people think an avoidant person simply moves on, that they feel relieved, that your absence barely registers. But psychology tells a more complicated story, because when you stop reaching out, you don't just create distance. You remove a pattern they quietly depended on, and that changes everything. At first, yes, there is relief. No pressure, no emotional demands, no expectation to explain, reassure, or open up. For someone with an avoidant attachment pattern, distance feels safe. Space feels like control, but that relief rarely lasts, because many avoidant dynamics operate on an unspoken rhythm. They pull away. You come closer, they create distance. You bridge the gap. That rhythm becomes predictable, familiar, safe, not because it creates intimacy, but because it lets them keep connection without fully risking vulnerability. When you stop playing your part, that rhythm breaks, and what first felt like freedom slowly becomes something else. Absence. Real absence. Not temporary distance. Not a pause. Not silence with the expectation that you'll return. For many people, that is the moment the psychology shifts, because once your pursuit disappears, something important disappears with it. Certainty. The certainty that you'll still be there. The certainty that they still have access to you. The certainty that nothing has truly been lost. And when certainty disappears, doubt begins. At first, the questions are small. Why haven't they reached out? Are they just waiting? Did they finally move on? Then the deeper questions start to surface. Did I matter more than I admitted? Was I too distant? Did I lose something real? This is where many people misunderstand avoidant attachment. Avoidant individuals often don't process emotions in real time. Instead of feeling everything immediately, they often compartmentalize, rationalize, suppress. Not because they don't feel, but because feeling too much has often felt unsafe for a very long time. That's why emotional consequences often arrive late, sometimes much later. A memory, a familiar place, a late night with nothing to distract them. And suddenly, what was once easy to ignore becomes harder to escape. Your absence creates a kind of psychological space that your presence never could. Because when you were there, proximity could feel overwhelming. But when you're gone, pressure disappears. And with pressure gone, clarity often arrives. They begin remembering things differently. Not just the conflict, not just the intensity, but the consistency. The person who kept showing up, the person who understood more than they said, the person who stayed even when connection was difficult. And that realization can be deeply uncomfortable because it forces a painful contradiction. The very connection they now miss may be the same connection they resisted when it was available. That is often where regret begins. Not always dramatic regret, sometimes quieter than that. A thought that lingers longer than expected. A different choice could have changed everything. There's another layer people rarely talk about. Many avoidant individuals carry a hidden fear beneath the independence. Not necessarily the fear of closeness, but the fear of being ultimately forgettable, of not truly mattering. So when you stop reaching out completely, the silence can activate something deeper than loneliness. It can activate significance, because silence says something words never can. It says, I will not keep proving my value where it is not being met. And that changes the power dynamic immediately. When you were chasing, you were emotionally available, but also predictable. When you stop, you become something different. A boundary, a decision, a person who chose self-respect over uncertainty. And that often creates a kind of respect that constant pursuit never could. Not because distance is manipulation, but because clarity is powerful. Your silence forces something that your effort often couldn't. Consequences. No more emotional safety net. No more assumption that they can take their time forever. No more certainty that the door remains open. And when consequences become real, self-reflection becomes harder to avoid. Some people will genuinely examine their patterns. Why do I pull away when things become real? Why do I want closeness but resist it when it arrives? Why do I protect myself so much that I lose what matters? For some, that becomes a turning point. For others, it becomes a regret they carry quietly into future relationships. But here is the most important truth. The real value of your silence is not whether they come back. It's not whether they finally understand. It's not whether they regret losing you. The real value is what your silence does for you. Because the moment you stop chasing someone who keeps choosing distance, you reclaim something much more important than their attention. You reclaim your center, your peace, your self-respect. And that is the part people often miss. Their realization may come late, or not at all, but your healing doesn't have to wait for their understanding. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. No final message, no explanation, no attempt to be understood, just absence. Not to punish, but to protect what remains of your emotional energy. And in that silence, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Your worth was never determined by their ability to recognize it.